Party leader is here in our conference studio. Morning to you.
Good morning.
We talked to Norman Lamb on the programme. We just heard a clip of it in the news bulletin. If we take this to the limit, he says, this new policy on revoking, where one side or the other is vanquished entirely, I think there's a real danger that we break the social contract in our country.
Well, I do believe that there is a challenge with the social contract. I think that for too many people, life has become too hard. Working 1-2 jobs, still finding it difficult to make ends meet. That basic social contract, I think, is part of why we find ourselves where we are. And there's a lot that needs to be done to address that. The difficulty is that Brexit makes all of that more difficult, because we're talking about something which is going to cost thousands of jobs, that is going to cost our economy, and it's going to be so much harder for us to tackle those genuine issues.
Give those points to people and say, OK, vote again.
We still want to have people's vote. We've been arguing for that for the last 3.5 years, where the Brexit deal will be put to the public in a referendum.
No, but if you get into power, you won't do it. And that's what upsets Norman Lamb and others as well. It's undemocratic, isn't it, to say to people in a public vote, have that vote, and then to say we're going to get rid of it without having it again.
I think that when we have an election, if we haven't had a people's vote, people will be looking at that election to resolve the issue of Brexit. And there are so many people in this country who are also sick of hearing about it, who want to get on with their lives, want the government to get on with making their lives better. And
that's a bit patronising, isn't it? They thought they voted to leave the European Union, and you're now suggesting to them they voted for all sorts of other reasons. Actually, they won't mind. Maybe they will, and maybe you should ask them.
Well, if we have an election, there's an opportunity for people to have their say. And what we're saying as the Liberal Democrats is we want to stop Brexit. We think our best future is in the EU, and so we will give people that choice. We will give people a choice at that election, and if the country chooses to put us in power with a majority, we will deliver on what we have said we will do. It's very clear, it's very straightforward.
And yet when the SNP say that in Scotland, and as they do repeatedly in elections, we want another referendum, if people vote for us, that's what we get, you say to them, no, you can't, you shouldn't.
Well, I think there's two things. I think the first is actually the SNP's typical playbook is going into elections not mentioning independence, saying to people that it's all sorts of other things they're voting for, like in the Shetland by-election a few weeks ago. No, they're really not. They say it's not about independence. Well, then after the vote, they suddenly claim it as a mandate.
Of the party, isn't it?
Yeah, but not in the way they talk debates.
If they went into an election, let's not argue about the details of their plan. If they go into an election in Scotland, because it seems like such a fundamental hypocrisy, doesn't it, on your behalf? If the SNP go into an election and say to the Scottish people, we want to have a new referendum campaign, and there's no need for anything except our endorsement at that election. That is the same, isn't it, as you going into an election and saying what you're saying to everyone else.
Well, I mean, I want our country to thrive, Scotland in the UK and the UK in the EU. The problem we're facing right now, which whether it's a people's vote or whether it's a general election can resolve, is how to get out of that chaos. What we're talking about in terms of Scotland, the idea of an independence referendum, is about adding more chaos onto an already difficult situation.
It's about a point of principle. It's nothing to do with what the results might be. It's a point of principle, isn't it? That either you can overturn a referendum by putting something in your manifesto and getting elected, or you can't. And you're saying in Great Britain writ large you can, but in Scotland you can't.
Well, I'm saying that the last thing Scotland needs right now is IndyRef 2.
I understand that. I understand the political point, but it's just a point of principle. It is simply a different principle for Scotland as it is for the UK, isn't it? I mean, you've got to accept that thing.
I think we're better off staying together. I think the United Kingdom is stronger as 4 nations working together, and I think that the European Union is stronger with 28 nations working together. My general principle of being open and internationalist, it is about working collaboratively, cooperatively with other countries to tackle shared challenges. And it is absolutely consistent to want Scotland to be in the UK and the UK in the EU. Arguably, I think it is much more inconsistent for the SNP to want out of the United Kingdom but to stay in the European Union, and the opposite for the Conservative Party.
If there is a deal, will the Liberal Democrats, and we leave the European Union, will the Liberal Democrats be a rejoin party?
I absolutely absolutely am determined that we keep our place in the EU, and I have not given up. I still believe that we can stop Brexit.
That wasn't what I was asking.
No, I appreciate that.
If there is a deal and we leave, which is entirely possible,
well,
anything is possible, that is possible, will the Liberal Democrats be a rejoined party?
I'm not going to get into the hypothetical, because I am absolutely focused and determined on stopping Brexit. That fight has not been lost. We are sitting here, it is September. We are still members of the European Union. It is a membership that brings huge benefits for our economy, for the way in which we have improved workers' rights, environmental protections, the way in which we engage around the world. And I'm not going to throw that away. I'm not going to accept defeat on that. We are going to fight to stay in the EU.
There was a suggestion in The Spectator recently that the broadcasters and the Conservative Party, and possibly Labour as well, are having talks about how the debates will pan out, if there are indeed going to be debates, at an election when it comes. Are you aware of those talks? Are you involved in them?
Well, we're very clear that we think that leadership debates on who's going to be our next Prime Minister at the next election have to include the Liberal Democrats. Now, you know, Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn will both want to say that this next election is a choice between them. But it is not. That is not a good enough choice for people in this country. And nobody should tell the British people that they do not get to choose something else. I'm standing as a Liberal Democrat leader to be Prime Minister of our country, and people deserve to have that choice and to hear about that in the debates.
If they freeze you out, what do you say to the broadcasters?
Well, I say they don't get to pick who, what people are going to vote for.
Well,
and they need to be very
they get
clear.
to pick who comes on, though, don't they? Which is extraordinary in some ways. It's not done by an independent commission or anything. It is these backroom talks. And I just wonder whether, almost a slight naivety in your party, you might get to the election and find yourselves frozen out. And in that case, what would you say right now to the BBC, to ITV, to Sky about the holding of debates without you in them?
Well, I think they should take and consider very seriously the responsibility that they have in making that decision, because politics is uncertain. I think we are on a moment of huge shift, and we have seen unpredictable results in other parts of the world and indeed in our country. And broadcasters need to make sure that people who are voting in those elections get the chance to see and hear from the people who might be their next Prime Minister, and to freeze out somebody who's in the running for that position would not be a responsible course of action.
And you would challenge it as much as you could?
Absolutely.
Jo Swinson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's